My name is Katie Brooks, and at 24, I just graduated college with honors after years of relentless hustle. I expected our family dinner to celebrate my milestone, but it turned into a brutal wake-up call. My dad leaned back in his chair, his laugh dripping with mockery, and said, "You're old enough to pay rent or get out." My mom just nodded, her eyes glued to her plate, refusing to meet mine while my sister sat across the table, her smug smile practically screaming she was in on it. They had no idea I'd been plotting my escape for years, not just months, or that I'd already locked down my own place, a home they'd never see inside. I'd played the long game, stashing every penny while they treated me like their personal ATM. The next day, as I grabbed my bags to walk out for good, my sister stood by the door still smirking happily, thinking she'd outsmarted me. "Goodbye," I said, tossing this month's bill onto the table, a number they'd never dreamed of. When they read it, $7,500, their faces drained of color, frozen in disbelief. I wasn't just leaving. I was shattering their illusion of control. Their pale faces were only the beginning. I was about to unravel years of their lies with one final move they'd never see coming. Before we dive into my story, I'm curious, what time is it where you're watching, and what city are you in? I love knowing how far my story reaches. Growing up in Bellevue, just outside Seattle, our family seemed like the ideal middle-class setup. Our 3-bedroom apartment had big windows with occasional glimpses of Mount Rainier. My father, Christopher, was a senior software engineer at a tech firm pulling in steady money, while my mother, Amanda, worked part-time at a cozy bookstore, her warm smile greeting customers. My younger sister, Jessica, and I had it. Good summers meant road trips to the Oregon coast. Birthdays came with cakes from the corner bakery, and Christmas was a pile of wrapped gifts. From the outside, we were perfect, but when I turned 15, the cracks showed. Dad came home one evening, his face tense, and announced he'd been laid off. His tech firm was slashing jobs, and his 12 years there didn't save him. Mom took on extra shifts at the bookstore, but her pay barely covered rent, let alone utilities or groceries. "It's temporary," Dad said at dinner, forcing a smile. "I'll land something big soon." That big break never came. Months dragged, and Dad only found part-time contract work coding for half his old salary. I'd see him late at night, laptop screen casting shadows on his frustrated face, scrolling job boards, or clicking through online ads. Mom's longer hours didn't help. Bills piled on the kitchen counter, unopened envelopes a constant reminder. Our home's light-hearted vibe turned to tense silences with sharp whispers after Jessica and I went to bed. By 16, I couldn't stand by. I got a job at a coffee shop near school, steaming lattes after classes and weekends. My first paycheck was $120, and I handed it to Mom. "Keep it, honey," she said, but her eyes showed relief. "No, Mom, I want to help," I replied. "We're in this together." That choice became a chain. It wasn't a one-time thing anymore, it was expected. When the electric bill arrived with a shut-off warning, Dad looked my way at dinner. "Katie, can you chip in this month? Just till I'm steady." I nodded. Family came first. I added evening shifts at the coffee shop and started tutoring middle schoolers in math on weekends. My grades took a hit, but I held a B average despite 20 hours a week. By junior year, I was paying for my own clothes, school books, and kicking in $250 monthly for household bills. Yet our finances never improved. What I didn't know was Dad's spending issues. He'd started buying tech gadgets, smart speakers, drones, even crypto trading accounts, claiming he could flip them for profit to save us. Mom later confessed she knew but felt helpless. He says it's the last time she'd whisper, but new packages kept arriving, cluttering our tiny living room. Jessica, 3 years younger at 18, acted like nothing was wrong. While I worked late, she hung out with friends, her phone always flashing new apps or selfies in designer clothes. When she wanted a $400 smartwatch for her birthday, the money appeared. When I needed new work shoes, I paid myself. Your sister's just a kid, Mom said when I pointed out the unfairness. Let her have her fun. But Mom's words cut deeper. If you helped more, Katie, we wouldn't be so stressed she'd snap, her voice heavy with blame. Once after I sent $300 for the water bill, she sighed. Other daughters do more without complaining. The guilt stung, but the real blow came when I found a receipt in the trash. Dad had used my tutoring cash to buy Jessica a $300 leather jacket. She wore it the next day, smirking, "Looks good, right?" like she knew where the money came from. That's when I started documenting everything. I bought a small notebook, hid it in my room, and logged every dollar I gave, dates, amounts, what it was for. I noted every bill I paid, every time Mom asked for just a little more, every gadget Dad ordered, every luxury Jessica flaunted. I even jotted down Mom's guilt trips, like when she compared me to obedient daughters in other families who never questioned helping. I wasn't just helping anymore, I was being played. The resentment built with every entry, every dollar I handed over, while Jessica got new sneakers or concert tickets. I kept quiet, worked harder, but inside I was done being their fix. The unfairness was just starting to show its true face, and what I'd uncover in high school would make it impossible to keep swallowing the lies. By high school, the weight of my family's expectations had become a constant grind. I was 16, juggling coffee shop shifts and tutoring gigs, covering my own expenses, textbooks, bus passes, even prom tickets, while still sending $250 home each month for bills. My grades held steady, but free time was a myth. Meanwhile, Jessica at 13 floated through life untouched. She'd show up at school in new sneakers or with the latest phone, flaunting them, while I wore the same jacket for 2 years. One day I overheard her with friends at the mall laughing, "Katie's so cheap always in those thrift store clothes. Guess she loves being broke." Her words burned, but I kept quiet, adding them to my notebook of grievances, every slight and dollar tracked meticulously. I wasn't just helping anymore. I was fueling their denial, and Jessica's mockery made it personal. The unfairness grew sharper in senior year. I was 17, working nearly 30 hours a week when Mom called during a break. "Katie, the gas bill's overdue. Can you send $150? We're struggling." I wired the money, eating instant noodles for a week to cover it. Days later, Jessica posted a selfie from a concert tickets easily costing $80. When I asked Mom about it, she brushed me off. "She's young. Katie, don't make her feel bad." But the sting deepened when I found a credit card statement in Dad's desk while grabbing printer paper. It wasn't his name on it, it was mine. They'd opened a card using my credit score without asking, racking up $3,000 for household expenses. I confronted Mom. It was just temporary, she said, avoiding my eyes. "You're helping the family, other daughters wouldn't complain." Her guilt trip hit hard, but the betrayal cut deeper. I started college at the University of Washington, Tacoma, staying local because a full scholarship was my only way out without abandoning them financially. I moved into a dorm, but kept working coffee shop weekends, tutoring evenings, sending home $300 monthly. My days were a blur. 6 a.m. study sessions, classes, till 3 p.m. work till 9, then homework till midnight. Friends invited me to parties, but I'd decline for extra shifts. Spring breaks were skipped when the water bill loomed. I told myself it was temporary, graduate, get a job, things would stabilize. But Dad's spending didn't stop. Packages arrived weekly, smart thermostats, VR headsets, crypto trading subscriptions he swore would turn things around. Mom enabled it, saying, "He's trying to fix our future." Meanwhile, Jessica, now 16, kept up her taunts. At a family barbecue, she told cousins Katie's too stingy to chip in properly. That's why we're tight. I overheard my face hot, but I bit my tongue, adding her words to my notebook. That's when I met Shannon, a financial advisor at a campus workshop. I spilled everything years of covering bills Mom's blame, Dad spending Jessica's entitlement, the credit card betrayal. Shannon listened, her expression grim. "You're carrying an adult burden while they exploit you," she said. "This won't stop unless you force it." She taught me budgeting, investing, and setting boundaries. "Your first loyalty is to yourself," she stressed. "You can't save others if you're drowning. We mapped a plan, keep sending money to avoid fights, but divert 20% of my earnings to a secret savings account. It started small, $50 a week, but it was mine." Shannon helped me research starter homes in up-and-coming Tacoma neighborhoods, affordable with my credit and future job prospects. I also learned the credit card debt could be disputed, but I held off, letting it fuel my resolve. By junior year, I was 20, and my secret account had grown to $8,000. I landed a paid internship at a marketing firm, impressed by my hustle, with a full-time offer waiting post-graduation. The resentment from high school, Jessica's mocks, Mom's guilt trips, Dad's lies, pushed me to plan beyond escape. I wasn't just leaving. I wanted to prove they'd underestimated me. I kept up the act, letting them think I was stretched thin, complaining about tight weeks when Mom asked for more. Jessica, now 18, kept pushing. She'd text, "Can you cover my phone bill? It's only $60. When I hesitated, she'd scoff. "You're so selfish, Katie." I logged every request, every jab, knowing I'd use it later. My notebook was now a ledger of their wrongs, and I was building toward a moment they'd never expect, a move that would flip their world upside down. By my senior year of college, I was 24 and had turned my resentment into a plan sharper than ever. My secret savings account, guided by Shannon, had grown to $12,000, and my marketing internship had locked in a full-time job offer starting at $55,000 a year. I was ready to break free, but I didn't just want out. I wanted to prove they'd underestimated me. I started playing a role the broke college student, stretched thin, barely scraping by. When Mom texted Katie, "We're short on rent, can you send $400? I'd reply, "I'm tapped out, Mom, maybe next week." I could have helped, but I chose not to. Their latest crisis, a $500 phone bill, was one I could have covered easily, but I let it slide, knowing they'd feel the pinch. It was deliberate. I stopped sending my usual $300 a month, right when their bills piled highest, setting the stage for a showdown. I'd been eyeing a small one-bedroom house in a growing Tacoma neighborhood just 15 minutes from campus. With my savings, solid credit from years of careful budgeting, and the job offer, I qualified for a first-time homebuyer program. The house was modest, outdated paint, a tiny yard, but sturdy bones. The sellers, moving cross-country, wanted a quick close at $160,000. My monthly payments would be less than what Dad was about to demand in rent. 2 months before graduation, I closed the deal in secret, telling my family I was pulling extra shifts. Shannon was there as I signed, her nod reassuring. "You're taking back your life," she said. I kept the house empty, visiting alone to map out where I'd put a couch or hang curtains, but mostly I steeled myself for the fight I knew was coming. Graduation day arrived bright and warm. I put on my cap and gown, nerves buzzing with anticipation. My roommate Angela adjusted my tassel, grinning. "This is your moment, Katie, don't let them steal it." The ceremony was on the University of Washington Tacoma's main lawn, rows of chairs facing a stage decked in school colors. I spotted my family in the crowd, Mom waving, Dad scrolling his phone, Jessica looking bored. When my name rang out, Katie Brooks, Bachelor of Marketing cum laude, I crossed the stage, diploma in hand, feeling a rush no one could take away. After Mom hugged me tight, "So proud, sweetie." Dad gave a quick pat. "Real world now." Jessica muttered, "Can we eat already?" No one asked about my plans, as if my degree was an endpoint, not a beginning. They'd booked a table at Luigi's, a mid-tier Italian spot near campus, a step up from our usual takeout. Dad made a show telling the waiter, "We're here for our daughter's big day." The waiter smiled. "Congrats, first drinks on us." Dad ordered a pricey Merlot. Mom picked a $30 seafood pasta, Jessica a $40 steak. I stuck with chicken Alfredo, already knowing I'd be handed the bill. The meal started light. Mom asked about classmates. Dad rambled about the ceremony's length. Jessica complained about the sun. But as mains arrived, Dad cleared his throat, raising his glass. To Katie, our graduate, he said, all smiles, "We're so proud of your hard work." I clinked glasses, letting myself feel the moment. Then his tone shifted, sharp and calculated. "But graduation means adulthood, and adulthood means stepping up." My stomach dropped. I knew what was coming. "Your mom and I talked," he continued, "and it's time you pay your way. You're old enough to cover rent or get out." I nearly choked on my wine. "Rent," I said, voice steady despite the anger rising. "Dad, I've been paying bills since I was 16. He waved it off. "Bits here and there, Katie. Now you'll have a real job. $600 a month plus utilities, fair deal, cheaper than moving out." Jessica smirked, leaning back. "Welcome to grown-up life, sis." Mom stared at her plate, silent as ever. "Let me get this straight," I said, my voice cold. "After years of covering your bills, working doubles through school, you want $600 a month, plus utilities." Dad's face stayed smug. "We've supported you forever, food, roof, everything. Your turn." I wanted to scream, to list every dollar I'd sent, every guilt trip I'd swallowed. Instead, I took a breath. "I'll think about it." That seemed to satisfy him, and talk turned to Jessica's summer plans, a trip with friends they were funding. I sat silent, appetite gone, my mind racing. When the bill came, $180, Dad slid it to me with a wink. "Your first adult expense, grad." I paid without a word, ignoring Jessica's grin and Mom's averted gaze. Driving home, I replayed their entitlement, my resolve hardening. I could have bailed them out of their latest crisis, kept the peace like always, but I didn't. I'd stopped sending money to push them to this point, and now their ultimatum had lit the fuse. Tomorrow I'd walk out, and they'd face a truth they couldn't ignore. The morning after that disastrous dinner, I woke up in my childhood bedroom, my resolve like steel. By 6 a.m., I was packing clothes in 2 duffels, books, and keepsakes in 3 boxes, a small pouch for my thrift store jewelry. Years of giving everything to my family left me with so little it all fit by the door in an hour. I heard Mom's footsteps in the kitchen, the coffee maker humming. I carried the first duffel downstairs, and she looked up, startled. "Katie, you're up early, coffee." "No thanks, Mom," I said, setting the bag by the front door. "I'm moving out today." Her cup froze midair. "What?" Because of Dad's words. "He didn't mean right now." "It's not just last night," I replied, heading back for another bag. "I've planned this for a while. It's time." She followed, voice shaky. "Where are you going? You don't have a place lined up." I smiled tightly. She had no idea I could plan without them. Dad woke to the noise, robe, loose hair, a mess. "What's going on?" he demanded. "Katie's moving," Mom said, wringing her hands. His eyes narrowed at the bags, anger flaring. "Over one conversation, this is dramatic." I grabbed a box of books. "It's not about last night, Dad. I start my job Monday, need to be settled." Settled where, he snapped, following me upstairs. "You can't afford a place yet." The irony of him lecturing me after years of draining my money almost made me laugh. "It's handled," I said, lifting another box. "I've been saving." His voice rose. "Saving. While helping us." I didn't answer, focusing on stacking my things. Jessica emerged, watching with a smirk, like she knew something I didn't. "Movers arrive at 9, I announced, checking my phone. Mom's voice was faint. "Movers, Katie? This is so sudden." Not to me, it was years of betrayal boiling over. They never imagined I'd have a life beyond their demands. The moving truck pulled up on time, 2 guys loading my stuff efficiently. I did a final sweep of my room, finding nothing left behind. As I turned to leave, Mom stood in the doorway. "I didn't realize you had so little," she said softly, almost seeing the imbalance for the first time. I nodded, brushing past. Downstairs, Dad was arguing with the movers about their parking. "Katie," he called. "What's this nonsense? I'm leaving now," I said. "I'll call in a few days." They followed me to my new Tacoma house, a modest 1-bedroom they didn't know I'd bought, the very place they'd eyed online for downsizing if things got tight. When they pulled up, their faces froze, recognizing the address. I let them in, blocking the doorway at first. "This is yours?" Dad asked, voice sharp, scanning the bare living room. "You bought this?" "Yes," I said, calm but firm. "How?" he demanded. "You gave us everything." "Not everything," I corrected. I opened my laptop, pulling up my ledger, years of documented abuse, every dollar sent, every bill paid, every guilt trip logged. "This month alone, I covered $7,500 in your bills," I said, pointing to the screen. "And that's just a fraction. I've given over $60,000 since I was 16. Mom gasped, hand to her mouth. Jessica's smirk vanished. Dad's face reddened. "You're exaggerating," he sputtered. "I have receipts," I said, clicking to bank statements. "Every transfer, every payment while you bought gadgets, Mom blamed me and Jessica got her luxuries." I paused, letting it sink in. "I could have stopped your latest crisis, paid the mortgage, kept the lights on, but I didn't. And this house, the one you wanted to move to, it's mine now." The silence was deafening. Mom tried her guilt trip. "Katie, how could you let us struggle? We're your family." I shook my head. "You used my credit, took my money, and called it help. I'm done." Jessica, desperate, tried to twist it. "You're selfish, Katie, hiding money while we suffered." She'd spread rumors to cousins, saying I'd ditched them, hoping to shame me back. It didn't work. "I'm not helping anymore," I said, voice steady. "You're facing foreclosure because of your choices, not mine. Dad's spending, Mom's enabling your lies. Jessica, it's over." Dad's voice cracked. "You can't abandon us." "I'm not abandoning," I replied. "I'm living my life, something you never let me do." I handed them an envelope with my new address for emergencies and a printout of my ledger. "Review this before you call me," I said, walking them to the door. Jessica's face was pale, Mom's eyes teary, Dad's jaw tight. As they left, I felt a rush of power and a pang of something else. Their world was about to collapse, and I'd made sure of it. 4 months after that confrontation at my Tacoma house, my life had transformed. My 1-bedroom home, once empty, now felt like mine, painted navy blue, with a second-hand couch and a small dining table where I'd sip morning coffee. My marketing job was a whirlwind of success. I'd landed a campaign lead role, earning a raise to $60,000 within weeks. Every paycheck was mine alone, a stark contrast to years of funneling money home. But the victory came with a cost. I'd severed all contact with my family, no calls, no texts, no trace. The silence was freeing but heavy, and the fallout from my stand was reshaping their world in ways that left me both triumphant and unsettled. Their Bellevue apartment was on the brink of foreclosure. Without my monthly $300, Dad's part-time coding gigs and Mom's bookstore wages couldn't cover the mortgage, especially after Dad blew another $1,000 on crypto trades chasing a big win. A cousin texted me that the bank had issued a final notice, 30 days to pay or lose everything. My savings could have bought them time, but I didn't budge. I'd carried them for years, and their lies. Dad's spending, Mom's guilt trips, Jessica's sabotage had burned that bridge. Jessica, now 22, was working shifts at a fast food joint, her first taste of real work. She'd vented online, bitter, claiming I'd left them to sink while flaunting her old designer bags. Her resentment didn't faze me. It proved she'd never own her part. I'd started seeing Brandon, a graphic designer from work whose calm support grounded me. One night over pizza at my place, he leaned in, eyes serious. "Katie, you're killing it house job freedom," he said. But cutting them off completely, was it worth losing your family forever? His words stung, forcing me to question the cost of my revenge. My neighbor Tiffany Ward, a kind retiree who'd brought me brownies on move-in day, said something similar while we chatted in her garden. "You stood up for yourself, and that's strength," she said, her voice warm but cautious. "But you seem so alone now. Did you have to burn it all down?" Their challenges hit deep, validating my choice, but exposing the loneliness beneath. I was unstoppable, my house payments on track, my career soaring, my finances untouchable. But late at night, the quiet of my home felt hollow. I'd won no question. My family's lifestyle was gone. No more coastal vacations, no gadgets for Dad, no luxury hauls for Jessica. Their world had collapsed just as I'd intended. Yet lying awake, I wondered if the justice I'd claimed was worth the emptiness. I could have offered a budget plan like Shannon once suggested, or helped one last time with boundaries. Instead, I'd chosen dominance, letting their house slip away to prove my point. The power felt good, but the solitude didn't. Here's what I learned: self-protection must come before family loyalty, because love shouldn't mean bleeding yourself dry. I gave over $60,000, absorbed Mom's guilt trips, and endured Jessica's lies thinking it was duty. But enabling their choices only trapped me. My revenge freed me, but it left scars, ones I'm still navigating. I'd tell anyone watching, don't wait for resentment to build like I did. If you spot financial abuse, guilt trips, secret loans, unfair demands, draw the line early. Your life belongs to you, not their crises. I'm stronger now, but I question if winning meant losing too much. Thanks for listening to my story. Please like, subscribe, and share your own experiences in the comments. It helps knowing others get it.
Outdated? After everything I've done for this company? I stared at James in disbelief, my voice barely audible in the suddenly silent conference room. "It's nothing personal, Ariana," he replied, his eyes not quite meeting mine. "We need fresh perspectives, new blood. The manufacturing industry is evolving, and we need to evolve with it." 20 pairs of eyes watched the exchange. My colleagues, people I'd worked alongside for years, shifted uncomfortably in their seats. A few looked down at their notebooks, avoiding the spectacle entirely. James adjusted his tie, a smirk playing at the corner of his mouth. "HR has your severance package ready. We'll need your security badge and laptop before you leave the building." The humiliation burned through me. 20 years at Meridian Manufacturing, gone in a 5-minute speech delivered at our monthly staff meeting. I took a deep breath, rose from my chair, and nodded. "I wish you all the best," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. I gathered my notepad and pen, the only personal items I'd brought to the meeting, and walked out without another word. "My name is Ariana Vasquez, 49 years old. Until 10 minutes ago, I was the production systems manager at Meridian Manufacturing, one of the largest custom metal fabrication companies in Chicago. I started as an assistant on the factory floor when I was 29 and worked my way up, learning every aspect of our production systems, both the visible ones on paper and the invisible ones that kept everything running smoothly. For 2 decades, I've been the person everyone called when things went wrong, the one who stayed late troubleshooting supplier issues, who knew which machines needed special handling, who remembered that client A needed their orders packaged a specific way, or they'd reject the entire shipment. I created workarounds and solutions that weren't in any manual because I had to. The company grew faster than our documentation could keep up. And now James Henderson, our new operations director, who'd been with the company all of 6 months, had decided I was outdated. As I cleaned out my desk, my phone buzzed with messages from a few colleagues expressing shock and sympathy. I appreciated the support, but knew it wouldn't change anything. I boxed up 20 years of personal items in under 30 minutes, a depressingly small collection of photos, awards, and desk trinkets. On my way out, I passed Denise from accounting, who gave me a quick hug and whispered, "This is crazy. You know that new automated inventory system they're implementing next week? No one knows how it integrates with our payment tracking system." I smiled sadly. I'm sure they'll figure it out. But as I handed my badge to security and walked to my car, a cold realization settled in my stomach. They wouldn't figure it out, because I was the only one who fully understood how deeply interconnected our systems were, and I had just been shown the door. My relationship with Meridian Manufacturing began when my daughter Sophia was just 4 years old. As a single mother with only an associate's degree, I was grateful for the stable job and threw myself into learning everything I could. The early years were a delicate balancing act: daycare pickups, pediatrician appointments, and late-night studying manufacturing processes after Sophia went to bed. I missed school plays and parent-teacher conferences because we had rush orders. I postponed vacations when systems needed upgrading. I skipped my own mother's 70th birthday celebration because a critical client was visiting. Meridian became my second home, and my colleagues became a kind of family. Robert, the previous operations director who retired last year, recognized my dedication. "You're the glue holding this place together, Ariana," he'd often say. Under his leadership, I was promoted 3 times, eventually overseeing all production systems. Robert understood that my value wasn't just in what I did, but in what I knew, the institutional knowledge that couldn't be captured in procedures or manuals. I tried to document the systems I'd created. I truly did. Every January, I'd start the year with the resolution to get everything on paper. But emergencies always took precedence. A supplier would suddenly go out of business, a machine would break down, or a client would need a last-minute change to a major order. The documentation remained perpetually incomplete, living largely in my head. When James Henderson arrived 6 months ago to replace Robert, I had concerns, but tried to give him the benefit of the doubt. He came from a larger manufacturing operation with impressive credentials and talked constantly about modernization and efficiency. At first, I appreciated his fresh perspective. Meridian had grown comfortable with certain inefficiencies, and some processes did need updating. I tried to work with him, explaining the complex web of systems and workarounds that kept our operation functioning. But James seemed more interested in quick wins than understanding the foundation. "We need to streamline," he'd say, waving away my explanations. "All this tribal knowledge is precisely the problem." When he announced plans to implement a new automated inventory system, I raised concerns about integration with our existing processes. "Trust me," he said, "this new system will make everything more efficient." I noticed how he started excluding me from strategic meetings, how younger employees with less experience but more technical degrees were suddenly being given projects that would normally fall under my purview, how my suggestions in meetings were frequently dismissed or interrupted. Still, I never imagined he would fire me. Not when I was the only one who understood how all the pieces fit together. Not when I had given the company 20 years of my life. That was my first mistake. 3 days after my termination, I was still in shock. I'd spent the time updating my resume, though it felt strange to condense 20 years of experience into bullet points. Sophia, now 24 and living in New York, called daily with encouragement and apartment listings in the city, suggesting maybe it was time for a change of scenery. "You've spent your whole life in Chicago, Mom. Maybe this is the universe telling you to try something new." I appreciated her optimism but wasn't ready to make any major decisions. First, I needed to process what had happened. That morning, I met Denise for coffee. She looked tired, with dark circles under her eyes suggesting she hadn't slept well. "It's been chaos," she said, stirring her latte absently. "The new inventory system went live yesterday, and nothing is working properly." I tried to hide my lack of surprise. "Teething problems. New systems always have them." "This is more than teething problems, Ariana." Orders are getting lost, inventory counts are wrong, and no one can figure out why the system keeps rejecting certain client accounts. She leaned forward. James is freaking out. The executive team is asking questions, and he's telling everyone that you deliberately sabotaged the integration. What? I nearly knocked over my coffee. That's ridiculous. I would never do something like that. We know that, Denise assured me. But James needs a scapegoat. As I drove home, my shock turned to anger. After everything I'd given Meridian, James was now attacking my professional integrity. It was beyond unfair. It was potentially damaging to my career if word got out. I was still fuming when my phone rang with an unfamiliar number. Assuming it was a recruiter, I answered professionally. Ariana Vasquez speaking. Ariana, thank God. The voice was immediately recognizable. David Sinclair, Meridian's CEO. We have a situation. The desperation in his voice was palpable. I remained silent, waiting. Look, I'll be blunt. The new system is a disaster. We've got orders backed up, inventory missing, and 3 of our biggest clients threatening to pull their contracts if we don't resolve this immediately. He paused. We need you back. I gripped the phone tighter. David, James just fired me. He's telling people I sabotaged the company. James doesn't know what he's talking about, David replied dismissively. He didn't understand how integral you were to our operations. None of us did, really. We took your knowledge for granted. The validation I'd been seeking for years had finally arrived, but only after everything had fallen apart. Part of me wanted to savor the moment, to let them struggle as I had so many times trying to keep their systems running. But another part, the part that had poured my heart into this company for 2 decades, ached at the thought of everything I'd built crumbling. Please, Ariana, David continued, his voice dropping to an almost pleading tone. Come back as a consultant. Triple your previous salary. We'll make it worth your while. I sat in my car, staring at the phone, a storm of conflicting emotions washing over me. They needed me now. But where was this recognition when it actually mattered? After a sleepless night weighing my options, I agreed to return to Meridian as a consultant, but on my terms. I would work remotely, set my own hours, and my contract would include a non-disparagement clause addressing James's false accusations. David agreed immediately, desperation evident in his voice. My first day back was strange. I connected to Meridian's systems from my home office, the familiar interfaces now viewed through a different lens. I wasn't an employee anymore. I was a hired gun brought in to save them from their own mistakes. It didn't take long to identify the primary issues. The new inventory system hadn't been properly integrated with the payment tracking system, exactly as I had warned. Moreover, several client-specific workarounds I'd implemented over the years had been overlooked during the transition. The system was trying to force standardization on processes that required customization. I documented the problems and solutions methodically, creating clear instructions for the IT team. By the end of the day, the most critical issues had been addressed, and orders were flowing again. I sent a comprehensive report to David, copying the relevant department heads but deliberately excluding James. The next morning, my inbox contained effusive thanks from David and several other executives. The only message from James was terse. Please copy me on all communications going forward. I replied with professional courtesy, attaching my previous report. Within an hour, he requested an emergency virtual meeting with me and the IT team. When I joined the video call, James's face appeared on my screen, tight with barely concealed anger. Ariana, while we appreciate your help with the immediate crisis, we need to discuss your approach, he began. Some of your solutions seem to be reverting us to the old methods rather than embracing the new system's capabilities. I'm using hybrid solutions that allow the new system to function with our existing client requirements, I explained. Many of our major clients have specific needs that the standard system doesn't accommodate. James shook his head. That's exactly the problem. We've invested in this system to standardize our processes. If we keep making exceptions, We'll never modernize. One of the IT specialists, Tom, unmuted himself. James, Ariana's approach is working. The critical errors have stopped, and we're processing orders again. Temporarily, James insisted, but it's not sustainable. We need to retrain our clients to work with our new standardized system. I muted myself to prevent an incredulous laugh from escaping. Retrain our clients? Some of these companies had been with Meridian for decades and represented millions in annual revenue. They wouldn't change their entire operation to accommodate our new software. The meeting continued with increasing tension. James kept pushing for his vision of complete standardization, while the IT team grew visibly uncomfortable with his dismissal of practical solutions. Later that afternoon, I received an email from James outlining a new direction for my consulting work, essentially asking me to create documentation for his standardization plan rather than fixing the immediate problems. It was a thinly veiled attempt to sideline me while still having access to my knowledge. I wrote a carefully worded response, copying David and the department heads, explaining why this approach would likely result in losing several major clients. I included revenue figures and contract terms to support my position. Within minutes, David called me directly. Ariana, ignore James's email. Continue with your current approach. You have my full authority. It was a small victory, but I knew it was temporary. James wouldn't simply accept being overruled. He would find another way to assert control and push me out again. That evening, as I reviewed system logs to track down a persistent error, I discovered something unusual. Someone had attempted to modify several key configuration files the night before I was fired. The timestamps matched a time when most employees would have been gone, but the building access logs would show who was present. I needed those logs, but requesting them would alert James that I was investigating. I needed to be clever about this. The next day, I called Denise under the pretext of needing clarification on some accounting workflows. Our conversation meandered naturally to the topic of the building's new security system installed last year. It's been a nightmare, Denise sighed. We have to badge in and out of every section, and it logs everything. HR uses it for time tracking now. That sounds tedious, I sympathized. Who manages those logs? Is it still building services? Or did they move that to IT? Neither. Everything's cloud-based now. Department heads can access their team's logs through the admin portal. This was exactly what I needed. Access to those logs would show who was in the building the night before my termination. Interesting, I said casually. Hey, since I'm working remotely, could you send me a link to that admin portal? I might need to check when certain team members were working on specific projects. Once Denise sent the link, I realized I needed login credentials. As a consultant, I no longer had admin access. I considered asking David directly, but worried it might raise questions about my intentions. Instead, I tried my old credentials on a hunch, and they worked. In their haste to bring me back as a consultant, IT had reactivated my previous access levels without adjusting the permissions. What I discovered in the logs sent a chill down my spine. The night before my termination, James had been in the building until nearly midnight, highly unusual for an operations director who typically left by 6 p.m. More importantly, he had accessed the server room using his badge. This coincided exactly with the system logs showing configuration changes. But why would James modify system configurations? He wasn't technical, and such changes would normally be handled by IT. I dug deeper into the system logs and found that the modifications were subtle but significant. Changes that would cause the new inventory system to fail in specific ways when integrated, but only under certain load conditions. The kind of failure that wouldn't appear in testing but would emerge catastrophically in production. The realization hit me like a physical blow. James had deliberately sabotaged the system, knowing it would fail after my departure. But why? What could he possibly gain from creating chaos? I spent the next 2 days discreetly investigating, careful to maintain my consultant duties while pulling on this thread. The picture that emerged was disturbing. Before joining Meridian, James had worked for Vertex Manufacturing, our largest competitor. His LinkedIn profile mentioned it briefly, but downplayed the connection. Further research revealed he had maintained stock options in Vertex even after leaving. Emails I accessed through my reinstated credentials showed James had been quietly advising several of our biggest clients to consider alternatives in the wake of our system problems. In one particularly damning message, he suggested Vertex specifically, noting their superior reliability. The truth was breathtaking in its audacity. James hadn't fired me because he thought I was outdated. He fired me because I was the only person who could prevent his sabotage plan from succeeding. He was deliberately tanking Meridian's operations to drive clients to Vertex, clients he had insider relationships with, clients whose business would significantly increase the value of his Vertex stock options. I sat back in my chair, heart pounding. I had evidence of corporate espionage and sabotage, but bringing it forward would be risky. James was still an executive with significant influence. If I mishandled this, he could twist it to make me look vengeful or desperate. I needed to be strategic about how I exposed him, and I needed to be absolutely certain of my evidence before making such serious accusations. The question was, how far was I willing to go to protect a company that had discarded me after 20 years of loyalty? The answer came to me that night as I stared at my ceiling, unable to sleep. This wasn't just about Meridian or my wounded pride. It was about the hundreds of employees whose livelihoods depended on the company's survival. People like Denise, who had worked alongside me for years, or Tom from IT, who was putting his kids through college with his Meridian salary. I needed irrefutable evidence and a plan to present it that couldn't be dismissed or buried. James had allies on the executive team, people he'd charmed during his short tenure. Going directly to David might not be enough if James could convince others I was fabricating claims out of resentment. The next morning, I created a secure folder containing all the evidence I'd gathered, the system logs showing the sabotage, the building access records showing James in the server room, and the emails to clients recommending Vertex. I encrypted it and stored it in multiple locations, including sending a copy to my personal lawyer with instructions to open it only under specific circumstances. Then I set a trap. I identified the next likely target in James's sabotage plan, the production scheduling system, which was due for integration with the new inventory system the following week. If he followed his pattern, he would need to make modifications soon. I quietly implemented a monitoring protocol that would alert me to any unauthorized changes, capturing detailed logs of the activity. For 3 days, I continued my consulting work while waiting for the alert. On the fourth night, at 11:23 p.m., my phone buzzed with the notification I'd been expecting. Someone was modifying the production scheduling system's core configurations, and the monitoring protocol was capturing everything, including a video feed from the server room's security camera that I'd managed to access. The footage clearly showed James working on a server terminal, his face illuminated by the screen's blue glow. I watched in real time as he systematically inserted errors into the system, errors that would cause catastrophic failures once the integration went live. I immediately called David, regardless of the late hour. "I need you to come to the office right now," I said, foregoing pleasantries, "and bring the head of security. James is in the server room sabotaging the production system as we speak." To his credit, David didn't question me. "I'll be there in 20 minutes." I forwarded the live security feed to David's email and then called Tom from IT, who lived closest to the office. "I need a favor," I explained. "Can you go to the office and make sure James doesn't leave the server room before David and security arrive?" While waiting for confirmation that James had been caught, I compiled my complete dossier of evidence and sent it to David with a detailed explanation of what I'd found. I included the connection to Vertex and the communications with clients. Just after midnight, David called. "We've got him," he said, his voice tight with anger. "Security is escorting him from the building. The police have been called." I exhaled slowly, tension draining from my shoulders. "You need to secure his computer and phone immediately," I advised, "and contact those clients he's been communicating with. There's no telling how many he's approached." Already on it, David assured me. Ariana, I don't know how to thank you. You've saved the company twice in 1 week. I did my job, I replied simply. The job I've always done. As I hung up, I felt an unexpected emotion wash over me. Not vindication or triumph, but a profound sadness. 20 years of my life dedicated to Meridian, and it had come to this. Saving the company from someone who had been there less than a year. But mixed with the sadness was something else. The dawning realization that I was finally free to choose what came next. The next morning, I arrived at Meridian's offices in person for the first time since my termination. The security guard greeted me with a surprise smile and a new visitor badge. Ms. Vasquez, good to see you back. David met me in the lobby, looking exhausted but relieved. Thank you for coming in. The board is assembling for an emergency meeting, and they've asked you to join. Walking through the familiar hallways felt surreal. Colleagues stopped to greet me, many offering quiet thanks or expressions of disbelief about James's actions. News had traveled fast. The boardroom was filled with tense executives when we entered. David guided me to a seat near the head of the table and began the meeting without preamble. As you all know, we've uncovered evidence that James Henderson was deliberately sabotaging our systems to drive business to our competitor, Vertex Manufacturing. The police are involved, and we've already contacted our legal team about industrial espionage charges. He turned to me. Ariana has compiled comprehensive documentation of the sabotage, which has been distributed to each of you. She was instrumental in uncovering this plot and catching James in the act. The board members reviewed the evidence in stunned silence. Finally, the chairwoman, Eleanor Barnes, looked up at me. Ms. Vasquez, on behalf of the board, I want to extend our sincere apologies for what happened. Your termination was clearly a terrible mistake. It was more than a mistake, I replied calmly. It was the result of a systematic devaluation of institutional knowledge in favor of surface-level modernization. James was able to target me precisely because the company had already minimized my contributions. An uncomfortable silence followed. This wasn't what they'd expected. Contrition and gratitude, perhaps, but not a critique of their leadership culture. You're right, David finally acknowledged. And that's why we'd like to offer you a new position, Vice President of Systems Integration, reporting directly to me. We need someone who understands both our legacy systems and how to modernize without destroying what works. I smiled. I appreciate the offer, David, but I have a different proposal in mind. 3 months later, I stood in the lobby of Meridian Manufacturing, preparing to leave after my final day as a consultant. The systems were stable, thoroughly documented, and managed by a team I had personally trained. The production floor was operating at peak efficiency, and client relationships had been largely restored. James Henderson had been arrested on corporate espionage charges, and Vertex Manufacturing was facing a major lawsuit. The scandal had made industry news, with James's reputation in ruins. Several other companies had discovered similar sabotage attempts in their systems, suggesting his scheme had been more widespread than initially thought. As for me, I had declined Meridian's offer of executive employment. Instead, I'd negotiated a 6-month consulting contract at an exceptional rate to rebuild their systems and train their staff properly. The experience had been cathartic, finally having the time and authority to document everything I'd created over 2 decades, to be recognized for my expertise, and to leave the company stronger than I found it. David approached as I prepared to leave. Are you sure I can't convince you to stay? He asked, not for the first time. I'm sure, I replied. You have my number if there's an emergency, but the team is well trained now. And Vasquez Systems Consulting is officially open for business? He asked with a smile. With Meridian as my first client reference, I confirmed. But not my only one. I've already signed contracts with 2 other manufacturers in the region. As I walked out of the building, my phone buzzed with a text from Sophia. Apartment hunting this weekend still on? I smiled and replied, absolutely. I'm thinking Manhattan might be nice. 20 years at one company had given me invaluable knowledge. The next 20 would be spent sharing that knowledge, on my terms, with proper recognition, and at a consultation rate that reflected my true value. Sometimes the best revenge isn't just proving them wrong, it's using their mistake to finally live the life you deserve.